This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I am your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two pinball wizards. This week, from the Next Issue podcast, our good pal Danny.
Hello, everyone.
And you know him, you love him, Paul Jasley.
Hello, humanoids.
I'm very glad to talk with both of you today. I'm especially ready to talk about comic books, but you know, I can't start an episode right now without talking about this one thing we have going on, and that is the I Read Comic Book Zine. It's happening March 3rd, by the way. I don't know if we announced that last week, but March 3rd is when it's launching. So you can go into the show notes, or you can just listen with your ears and type this into your browser, ircb.fyi/zine, and that'll take you right to the Kickstarter page. You can get notified when it goes live. I think we've got, as of recording today, we got 39 people following this. If we can get to 100 by March 2nd, I can breathe with relief that maybe half of those people will support it and we'll be in like a really good spot to get this thing happening. I'm super pumped, if only because we keep seeing pages of art. I've been sharing some of the pages of art with the rest of the folks, and it's incredible work. The one that we got just this past Friday or Thursday, just top-notch stuff. Like, I think, Paul, you were like, this fucking rules. Like, that's all you said. And I'm like, that is the best way to describe it. So we at I Read Comic Books are very excited for this. I think all of you should be excited given the names that we've got on this thing. 20 artists total. So go to ircb.fyi/zine and you can get notified when this Kickstarter goes live on March 3rd. So that's all I got to say about that. We got to move on. We're here to talk about comic books as expected. I've got two legally mandated questions that I need to ask you guys, and that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Paul.
You know, Mike, I've been doing pretty well. It's been, a typical West Michigan winter over here, which is great weather for sitting inside and reading comics all evening, which is what I've been doing. I mentioned this on the IRCB Discord yesterday, but I might as well say it here on the show. I set myself a goal this year. I'm going to read all 104 issues of the Fantastic Four by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby before the new movie comes out. So these are all the comics from the 1960s that Jack and Stan did together. I've read a handful of these before. I mean, I'd read the first issue a couple times. I've read the Galactus trilogy. That's issues 48 through 50. Great stuff. And of course, this is sort of the beginning of the Marvel Universe as we understand it. This is kind of the first big book that Jack and Stan did together. They kind of established the idea of the larger continuity to the Marvel Universe. They introduced so many amazing characters, the FF, Doctor Doom, Galactus, Silver Surfer. So it should be a fun ride. And I got through the first 7 issues this weekend, which feels like a pretty good pace. If I can keep that up, I'll be done in no time. Right?
Yeah. I'm sure none of them will be a slog. It'll be all easygoing.
Right, exactly. Again, these are comics written in 1961, so they are written very differently. Stan Lee is doing his thing. Jack Kirby's still kind of figuring out how the team's going to look, what the look of the book is going to be. But I think that's what makes it so interesting, because we know the Fantastic Four as they are today, and to kind of see them going through these growth pains and like they're trying to figure out how to do their take on a superhero book. It does not feel like other superhero books from the Silver Age, especially DC stuff. You know, the Fantastic Four, they're a family, not a team. They don't even get their costumes or uniforms until the 3rd issue. Like the first 2 issues, they're just in like street clothes and stuff. It's fascinating. And then like the Thing doesn't look like the Thing yet. He doesn't have that big eyebrow ridge that we know and see in the trailer for the movie. It's not there yet. Doctor Doom shows up, I think, in issue 5. And he's like 4 or 5. Yeah. And he's, his issue is so bizarre, because you think of Doctor Doom being like this big bad guy, and he is. Like, they introduce him, give him his origin story. His plot in the first issue is to kidnap the Fantastic Four, send them back in time so they can steal Blackbeard the Pirate's treasure chest and bring it back for him. That's his super villain plot. And of course, they go back. Yeah, right. Makes sense. They go back in time and they dress Ben Grimm, the Thing, up in a pirate outfit, and he has a big black fake beard on. And it turns out that's Blackbeard. Like, all the other pirates, like, hey, it's that Blackbeard guy. Like, so Ben Grimm is canonically Blackbeard the pirate, and they steal his own treasure. Fascinating.
I see. So in the Marvel 1602 run that happened, which, like, fuck Neil Gaiman, but like,
right.
The Marvel 1602 book that they did, that was, I don't remember who was on the creative team on it, but it was about the Fantastic Four. They were like ship sailing, not pirates, but like, I'm pretty sure Ben Grimm had that look. I did not realize that was a reference to this old 60s comic. That's crazy. That's really cool.
Is that really funny? Yeah, because it's such a bizarre story, but you figure like the Fantastic Four that Stan and Jack do, they establish this sort of continuity. Again, the first kind of bad guy they fight, or one of the first ones they fight, is Namor the Submariner. So they bring back this character from the 40s, and there's a panel where Johnny Storm is reading a comic book. He's reading a Marvel comic that has Namor in it. And like, he's like, there's also a later issue where he's reading an issue of the Hulk. So the Marvel comics exist in the Marvel universe. It's like fascinating. And it's like, what I love is that all that becomes codified, but at the time, Jack and Stan are just trying to make comics month to month. They're writing so much stuff, drawing so much stuff. It's just like, they're not plotting it out. It's just like, here's this happens this issue. But over time, it develops this huge universe. And like, I think that's what's so fascinating about it. So, I think by issue 7, it kind of starts to really feel like a Fantastic Four comic. Like the early issues, they mostly fight big monsters. Like even the Namor story, Namor summons a big sea monster for them to fight. So it's still like a monster comic that Marvel was doing before that. But then issue 7, it's like a Twilight Zone type of story. This alien on another planet kidnaps the Fantastic Four to help him save his planet from destruction. But it turns out he wants to dictate and rule over his planet. So Reed has to thwart him. It's great stuff. And that's when Kirby starts drawing like Kirby tech, like the spacecrafts, the weapons, they look incredible. And it's like, you can see the gears turning and Kirby really like putting his heart into this book. And I think that's what makes this stuff so great. So I'm excited to keep my journey going. I'll do regular updates on the Discord, how far I get. So wish me luck.
Hell yeah.
I'll see you at issue 104, hopefully before July.
Yeah.
Paul, I got a question about, especially one of the things that kind of gets me about reading older books like that is that these were designed in mind to like, this is the only comic you're ever going to get about this, maybe, like as the reader, right? It's not like they were planning for you to buy all 50 issues or whatever.
Yeah.
So how is it reading a bunch of them at the same time? Because they have to explain a lot over and over. I remember sometimes I would just skip a lot of the initial narration because it's just Stan Lee telling me like, this is the Fantastic Four and this is who they are. And so how is that going like through these on our, like all at the same time?
I mean, I noticed that in the first like 4 or 5 issues, there'd always be like a half a page or 1 page where Reed or one of the team has to be like, hey, remember when we flew those cosmic rays and we got those powers? And it's like brief little like a recap. They kind of stopped doing that at a certain point. There's things where they kind of maybe explain their powers, or Mr. Fantastic is like, I'm stretchy, so I can do this. Like, well, we know that. And clearly Kirby's drawing that happening, but it's not as annoying as I expected it to be. I think they very quickly kind of like trust the reader enough to get over that. But it does happen in the first few issues because, again, they didn't know it was going to be a hit yet, you know?
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But again, I mean, Stan Lee's writing is like, it takes a while to get over it. And then it's not too bad yet, but I do know based on other stuff I've read that, the way he writes Sue is not great. Like there's a lot of inherent sexism happening. Surprise, surprise. And I think later on, when you get to Galactus stuff, later on in the series, you can see the tension between Kirby and Lee, where they're just like, Kirby clearly scripted out one story that he drew, and then Stan kind of writes it differently or interprets it differently. And like, that does create tensions. One of the reason that Jack leaves later on, but like, so far they seem to be on the same page. So again, maybe that's something I'll keep an eye on and update people on as I keep going, how that changes.
Nice.
Interesting. Man, I have to commend you on reading some of these older books. So yeah, and one thing I will say, Paul, I think as part of this, it would be interesting if you could snag any screenshots or any panels that may stand out to you that are kind of fun. Only because I would love to see the Thing dressed as Blackbeard.
For sure. Yeah.
I definitely feel like you should. I really would love you if you shared more of those. Just if only because that time is one. It's funny, but two, like Kirby's art is just incredible, and like to see it evolve in that early book. I mean, it's got to be something spectacular. So let us know. Keep us posted.
For sure.
Yep.
Danny, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
Mike's been a pretty good week overall. Real busy. Work's been busy, but it's been all right. Comics, as always. My escape, my one silver lining.
Yeah.
I think no, there's multiple silver linings. I spend all my time watching a lot of TV as well, but I love going into comics, and I'm doing this thing where I'm trying to. There's a lot of books when I'll read when they'll come out. I'll read a number one. And then I'm like, oh, I'll revisit this when it's done. And then it's been years and I've never revisited.
Yeah.
So I'm trying this thing this year. Maybe this should be added to our resolutions episode. But it's like, if it's a number one that I've read in the past, let's try to finish it. I've done that with a few things. Funny enough, a lot of Hayden Sherman art on these things that I've been reading.
Hmm.
So the thing I'll be talking about today is also a Hayden Sherman work. Before I dive into that, though, I just want to give a quick shout out. Batman 157, the last issue of the Zdarsky Jorge
Yeah.
Jimenez run, which abruptly has come to an end. If you if you follow Zdarsky on Substack, he gives you two really funny, two versions of what happened. One's what really happened, and the other one is Mark Wade got drunk with power because of everything he's doing, and he fired him, which is the version that I'm a biggest fan of because it's more controversial.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed his run overall, and I don't know if it was everyone's favorite, but I had a really good time with it, especially because Jorge Jimenez. I hope he comes back to the book at some capacity because, man, his art is beautiful stuff.
See, this now that this has come to an end, I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for me to sit down, read it, and then get both of you back on the show and be like, from polar opposite ends, and somebody who's really not invested in Batman, let's talk about this run by Chip Zdarsky.
Yeah. I feel like I should reread it because I remember not digging it the first, few issues or so. And then I think it's issue 150 or 151. I was like, that's a really good solid issue. And after that, I kind of liked it more. So it'd be fun to go back and reread it. And again, Jorge Jimenez is just an incredible Batman artist. So I hope he sticks with the book at least.
And a lot of the guest artists too that came in, Mike Henderson and stuff like that. But now we're gearing up to Hush 2. So
Hush 2,
everybody
Electric
wanted
Boogaloo.
Hush 2 story. So here we are.
Right.
But anyways, there's our Batman for the day. That's contractually obligated. But what I did read this week as well was Dark Space's Wildfire. This collects issues 1 through 5. I don't know if you guys remember, IDW was doing some originals back in the day, late 2022, early 2023. This was one of them. It's written by Scott Snyder with art by Hayden Sherman, as I mentioned earlier. Colors by Rhonda Pattinson. Letters by Annual Design. And I remember reading this originally, that first issue when it first came out, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This looks really good. But then because they were dropping so many of those originals, I would just keep checking out number ones and never going back to finish them. And I don't even know how I got into it. I think I was reading Into the Unbeing because I got the Dark Horse sent me a review of their collection, and I was like, "Oh, Hayden Sherman! I forget how good he is outside of superheroes, he's really good at the stuff he's doing at DC right now." But so I was like, "Let me go look for other stuff," and then I saw that these books were also part of his work. I borrowed them on Hoopla, and this one's really, unfortunately, it's a little timely. 6 weeks into the slow burn of the historic Arroyo fire in California, a crew of women from an inmate firefighting program are risking everything in the front lines when their new recruit, a white-collar convict with a deep network of shady dealers, discovers that mere miles from where they are, one of her former associates has an abandoned mansion, and she proposes a plan to abandon their duties and hunt for the riches that are covered in smoke and ash. So the team must decide if they want to jeopardize everything they've worked for, or if they want a shot at the big score and that could change their lives. And it's a really fun premise. It's the idea of a heist that is happening while you're being surrounded by this natural disaster, and that's kind of the cover of it. What really makes this work to me is, first of all, Hayden Sherman's art. He's really good at presenting distinct, unique feeling characters. Everyone's wearing firefighter gear. Everyone's waiting. They all kind of look the same if you don't even think about it. But Hayden Sherman designs the way they do their faces, and then Pattinson's colors of the characters, their hairstyles. They find ways to make these characters recognizable even under all this stuff that's going on. Because you would think inmates probably all have to dress the same, and firefighters also, of course, have to wear the same gear. One thing that they do, Pattinson chooses different colors that are outside of the norm to kind of make it stand out, because everything has this tint of orange burnt color and
Mm-hmm.
and the surrounding area. So like they use a lot of cool colors to just color in the characters and make them kind of stand out in the middle of the page. That's very cool. They choose some really interesting paneling layouts as well that feels like the tension's rising or like maybe the fire's coming closer. So like the panels are getting smaller and smaller because they're kind of running out of space.
Interesting.
Um, and then each of the characters like they feel very distinct the way they're written. You get to spend a little bit of time with everyone and trying to kind of figure out how did they end up in the situation that they're in. um, and as the tension's rising, like Scott Snyder puts in these moments of levity that feel like a little bit of a relief in between like all the run around and everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But once the big climax happens, and it's a combination of like the fire and some big twists and turns in the story. Like it just really works. It's got great pacing. Like you keep turning the page, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm already 4 issues into this. Like, how are we gonna get everything resolved?
Mhm.
But it all works out. We follow this character who's like the prison guard that's overseeing the team, Ma, who's like the kind of the leader, and you really feel that there's a bond between all of them, even though like there is that relationship of like prison guard and inmate. So it really works. It was just yeah, really really fun, really interesting, and I love a good heist book. And then like I said, in this unusual situation that just happens to be a little timely for the for when I was reading it,
Yeah.
it really really worked. So I'm actually going. I've read all the Dark Spaces except for one of them as of now too, like all the anthology. Not all of them are by Scott Snyder, but they're all pretty good. So I'll probably keep talking more if I show up on the show, or if not, just follow me online. Probably won't shut up about these for a while. So
Yeah, I didn't realize, I think I'd heard of this Dark Spaces thing. I didn't realize there was like 4 different series in this.
Mhm.
That's really cool. Yeah, man, whatever happened to IDW,
They got that Ninja
They
Turtle
really
money.
tried
And
it.
They're just the
yeah.
turtle it's the turtle company
Yeah.
now, I guess. That's all.
Well, they lost Transformers, they lost Ninja Turtles, so they're like, well, let's do original stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think that panned out the way they were planning on it.
Yeah.
But they kind of have gone back to like, let's just do our franchise stuff that we have left over.
Mhm.
So
Well, one day I'll get somebody from IDW here and they'll answer the hard questions that we'll throw at them.
What's
But until
Godzilla
then,
really like?
yeah. Oh, brother. Well, let me talk about a book that I read. I feel like my whole life has been playing Pokemon Go, working on the zine, and reading comics for other podcast episodes. Right? We just recorded an episode of IRCB Movie Club that's coming out later this week, or later this month, I should say. Talking about Superman Returns. So if you're not on the Patreon, boy oh boy, you're gonna want to hear me and Brian and Paul talk about that. It's pretty fun. I also read a bunch of Usagi Yojimbo for comics that we love. That's coming out probably later this month, next month. I'm not sure. But Zach and I talked about that, and I mean, I have no qualms going back and rereading Usagi Yojimbo comics. I mean, some of the best that you can read as far as I'm concerned. But I did sit down. And for anyone interested about my Pokemon Go exploits, I did manage to catch 2 Dynamax Moltres. So, I got a crew of people together. It's pretty cool. Be impressed, Paul and Danny. Just act like you're impressed. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mike, over the
you.
past couple of weeks, you doing that and the zine and everything, I'm like, Mike's just really good at like riling up people and like getting them like excited about doing something. Like
Listen.
that's a superpower that I don't think everyone has.
Here is the secret. Okay. Going out and doing it. That's the old, and that sounds really stupid, but like I said this before, I think I went to a couple, I've been organizing these Pokemon Go things. I've been trying to do this zine, whatever, like the Pokemon Go events, people have said, man, I'm so glad somebody finally did this. And I'm like, what do you mean? Any of you, all 12 of you at this event, any of you could have organized and nobody did. And that's I understand we all have different priorities and we have different energies and whatever, but like, all it takes is just one person be like, hey, I'm going to be here. If you want to do this, come to me. And then it just
Now,
repeats itself after that.
remember, Mike, some of those people can't cross the street by themselves.
Okay.
So it's a little harder to organize a
All right.
Pokemon Go thing.
That's true. I guess. But anyways, so it's been a lot of just movement and all this other stuff. But I feel like I I've been able to keep it a little bit contained. We'll see how the next couple of weeks go. I'm going to MagicCon in 2 weeks, so like that may just throw me off my complete schedule. But for now, have been reading some comics. I did read a book called Adrift on the Painted Sea. This is by Tim Bird, featuring paintings by Sue Bird, which is Tim's mother. This is maybe one of the most beautiful and sad books I've read in a long time. Content warning here is parental aging, sickness, grief. It's a book about basically this man's life and his mom. It's I don't know. It's a hard book to describe because it, like I said, one of the most moving books that I've read in a while. It's like a beautiful dedication and reflection of love and loss to one person's parent. The story is Tim Bird reflecting on the life of his mother and her, quote, hobby of painting absolutely stunning pieces of art. Like, he talks about throughout the book about how his mom was constantly finding time to paint, and it was always her thing. And he himself is an artist, but he doesn't really kind of draw those lines together. He's like, my mom was just always painting things, and she had paintings all over the house, to the point where like every nook and cranny in their house was filled with these paintings that she had just made. And so it's a narrative about Bird's memories of his mother throughout his life and his fondness for her dedication to painting, where she would literally make time to like take care of the family, do whatever she needed to. But then she's like, I'm going to go paint for 4 hours. I'll see you guys later. Right. He doesn't dote on it as like a bad thing. He just always found it interesting that was something his mom did. And so as she got older, he started to think about that more and more. And like from start to finish, the book shows this level of care and reverence for his mother and her incredible abilities and how it like developed over time. Like, Bird really only seems to interject his own art where the true narrative is needed, and showcases the work of his mom constantly throughout the book. Like, every page is just a painting after a painting after a painting. And it's super beautiful because he manages to find paintings that kind of reflect the moment that he's discussing in his own like memories, which I think is really, really cool. Like, I don't know if they line up time-wise in terms of like when I was 9, here's a painting from when I was 9. I don't think it lines up like that, but he's just kind of he spends the entire book just kind of thinking about his mom. And, as the story goes on, it does get sadder and sadder as like she gets older and a little bit sicker and stuff. But their way that the book ends, like, I left this book like feeling like there was so much care put into 78 pages, so much love, so much fondness for a person. It is a sad book, but I didn't leave the book feeling overwhelmed with grief like I have with other books where you're just like, God damn, that's so sad. I felt like this was his publishing was like a way for him to kind of come to terms with the grief that he was feeling, while also creating maybe one of the most beautiful celebrations of a person's life that I've ever read in my entire life. And that may be a huge exaggeration, but nonetheless, like, every single page dedicated to the work that his mom did, and being able to showcase it page after page after page. Like, there was no true sadness by the final pages of this book. Like, the last few pages are just kind of this kind of flat calmness that feels like something that, I don't know, I feel was necessary, because you could have just left it with like, and this was the story, but he gives a couple beats of like pause, and it really allows you to breathe and feel like, I felt this pain, and now I feel like satisfied, and I understand this person way better than I could have ever understood them. This is just an incredible book for being so short. I sat down and read it, and I felt a whole wave of emotions in such a short amount of time. Really, really great. It's something I see as like almost an aspirational thing to be able to say, I put this stuff to paper as like reflecting on another person's life through comics. And it's like, there is no better way to like memorialize a person than the way that I think Bird did it in this book. Not only is it like just a bunch of beautiful art, it's such a well put together, well paced story about one person's life. And I think we've all maybe read biographies of people that are like 600 pages long or whatever. And it's like 78 pages was all this guy needed to really show like who his mother was and how much he meant, or she meant to him. So if you're looking for something that'll kind of knock you, but it'll make you feel really good at the end, Adrift on the Painted Sea by Tim Bird is just stupendous. Such an incredible book.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating, Mike. So yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Huh.
Yeah. Again, just the paintings in this alone are just like stupendous. And I'm like, you could have just made an art book and that could have been something, but like to combine it all together is like so smart, so clever.
That's really nice, Mike. It made me think, as you were talking about it, my grandmother on my mom's side, so my mom's mom, she used to paint with acrylics, and I remember like since I was a kid, I think she's been the only artistic influence I've ever had, like in the
Oh,
family. Like
okay.
she used to paint. I remember like I would watch her paint, or like she'd have Bob Ross on in the TV, and like and she would draw ships too, which is like I don't even know where. Like we lived in the city, so I don't know why ships was her preferred
She yearned for the
thing.
sea, Danny.
Yeah, I guess. So. But like I'm sure I have some of her paintings around the house somewhere. So it's really nice to see like how, because you were talking about like how Tim didn't really fully connect like the lines between that, and sometimes you don't really think about that because sometimes I draw and I'm like, I don't know where this came from. Like this is, but then you start to think about it, and I'm like, I'm sure my grandma had a lot to do with that influence. And every time I think about that, I'm like, man, I should really try to do some work on acrylics, but it's so daunting. Like she was really brave. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, grabbing a canvas, like a tablet is easy. You could just undo.
Yeah.
The permanency of paint.
Like,
Yes, I feel it.
Exactly.
I feel that.
I know there's happy little accidents, but
Well, Danny, if you have any of those paintings, I would love to see them. Just if only because, like, that's really cool that you had someone in your family that was doing that, and that you guys at least have
I'll
the
look
paintings and
around
stuff.
for
Yeah, that'd be
sure.
cool, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, Drift on the Painted Sea. I highly recommend this book from Avery Hill Press. It's incredible stuff. Listen, these small publishers sometimes. Oh boy, it's good stuff. I mean, Avery Hill in specific has published some really, really good comics that I've read. A lot of autobio stuff, semi-fictional stuff. They really, when they publish something, it's really top notch. So I highly recommend them as a publisher in general. But yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are on the top of our pile, whether they're new or old or just something you're trying to get off your shelf. That's been my go-to recently. Just get this thing off my shelf, or at least get it read. So when I look at it, I go, did I read that or not? But I want to shout out some of our folks on the Discord hanging out with us today and what they're reading. Emmett is reading Skin Police number 3 and 4. Man, I need to get to those issues as well. Paul G is reading The Last Band on Earth, which is a Kickstarter comic. And Aaron is going to be reading a book from our reading challenge, Avengers Twilight, which oh boy, what a cool little comic book. Like it's a perfect 3.5 out of 5 comic book. I love that thing. Like I wanted it to be 12 issues, but also I think if it went to 12 issues, it would have felt too there's something, but it looks so freaking good. Oh man, you can't find a better looking Avengers book out there as far as I'm concerned.
Pretty sure, I think that was my pick, right? If I'm not,
I think it was. 3.5 out of 5 is good, Aaron. That is on the positive side, right? Anyways.
Quick warning to Emmett, Skin Police is actually part 1 of a larger story. So even though it ends with 3 and 4, the first part, which they don't really advertise it, there's a Skin Police 2 that's coming later on. But I really enjoy that book as well. So looking forward to hearing your feedback on that, Emmett. Let us know on the Discord.
Yeah, Aaron, I don't know how often you read Avengers comics too. I want to hear your thoughts on it once you finish it. But let me kick things over to Paul. What is on the top of your pile this week?
Well, I mean, aside from another 97 issues of the Fantastic Four, I have other comics I want to read. One of which is a book called Mugshots that Mad Cave put out. It's one of those books that I saw in previews, caught my eye, ordered the first issue, promptly forgot that I'd ordered the first issue. So I get the first issue from the shop. They didn't order the other issues for me because it's not a big book. Obviously, they're not getting a lot of Mad Cave stuff. So I decided to wait and pick up the trade that just came out this week, picked up from the shop. This is a comic written by Jordan Thomas with art by Chris Matthews and letters by Lucas Catani. It's a miniseries for Mad Cave, like I said. And it's a crime comic set in the year 2008 in Brighton, UK, England, about a former... Gotcha. It's not Baby Driver. It's another Brighton, different spot.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that the movie where they use Brighton Rock, the Queen song in that movie? That's what I always makes me think of it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's about a former professional criminal named John Bannon who has to return to his past life after his niece is kidnapped. His past catches up with him when he comes back to the town he fled after a deal gone bad. The local crime boss is out to kill him. He doesn't get along with his sister or his brother-in-law, but he's trying to find his niece. What really caught my eye actually was the artwork by Chris Matthews. It really reminds me of the Parker books that Darwin Cook did or David Aja's Hawkeye work. Very thick, simple black line work with monochromatic color blocking, usually like a yellow and a blue on the page. That's all the color you get. But it's kind of just a very simple line work. It looks very almost cartoony, but the way he's able to draw expressions and action, it's really eye-catching stuff. And like when I saw the cover, saw a couple of preview pages, I'm like, yep, I want to read that. So I'm glad I finally got the trade so I can finish the story, because I did really like the first issue when I read it. So I'm always here for a good crime comic, especially one that looks as cool as this. So that's Mugshots from Mad Cave. I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah, the art almost reminds me of November.
Yes.
Did you ever read that from Image Comics and Matt Fraction, Elsa Chartier?
Yep.
Or Chartier? Man, I totally see that, but also like it's got its own thing. Oh man, this, Paul, you may have sold me on a Mad Cave book. I don't know if that's ever happened before on this show.
I always check their section in previews, and like I think this is the only book of theirs I've bought, but I always kind of look. It looks like they have some interesting stuff there. So I mean, I'll keep my eye out for more trades from them that look interesting for sure.
Man, I might have to find this. This does look like, honestly, the art alone is making me like very interested in it. So I mean, that might be worth reading a 4-issue story. So 4 or 5, I don't know how many issues it is.
I think it's 5. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let me talk about a book that's on top of my pile this week. I think I mentioned last week I was going to be reading The House of Lothar Volume 2. I was very, very excited. And boy, oh boy, I was not disappointed. 5 out of 5, just absolutely knocked it out of the park. If you like Volume 1, you're going to love Volume 2 even more. There's a moment in the middle of the book where I almost started crying. It was such a beautiful transition to something that I totally didn't see coming. This is one of those books where I feel like I see a lot of the twists and turns coming, but something happens where I went, oh no, this is not a feeling I expected to feel in this book. So highly recommend that. Go read it on Webtoons. It's great. If you can, get the hardcover from Caitlin Smith. She deserves your money. She is an incredible cartoonist in general, and her writing is fantastic. I think she develops really, really strong, like, lovable characters very quickly. Another book that I'm reading this week from her, because I'm on a kick, is Plume. This is a finished 500-page comic book series that I have collected all in one big hardcover. I saw that Caitlin Smith, I think a year or two ago, was like, hey, I'm putting out a hardcover of this old comic I did. And I said, I don't care what it is, buy. Because that's where I'm at with her stuff. I really, really enjoy her work. But the summary of the story is Plume is a Western adventure about Vesper Grey and her supernatural and reluctant guardian Korik. On their way to recover some stolen artifacts, they start to learn the gritty truth about the past and how far they're willing to go to amend it. I don't know what this is. I don't care. I'm here to read Caitlin Smith drawing really cool Western weird sci-fi stuff, and I'm sure there's some sci-fi, I should say supernatural stuff that's going in. This is an old book though, it came out in like 2011, but I'm ready to dig in. Like I said, I've got this hardcover sitting on my shelf. It looks beautiful. It's a bigger hardcover. It's not like the digest size hardcovers, which House of Lothar is made out of, or made into. So I'm excited to just like have these huge like pages to look at, because her art is always stupendous. But I'm curious, it's a 15-year-old comic book. Has she been consistent forever? We'll see. I'm sure that it's great though. So I'm very excited to get into this. But Plume by Caitlin Smith. I mean, guys, I recommend every single thing that she does. She's so good. She's so good. And that is not just me saying that so that she'll come on the show and talk to us. That's genuinely how I feel about that. I think Kate Lamphere on the show also agree. Anybody out there, I think, who's read her stuff would agree with me as well. So
nice.
Yeah. Danny, what about you? What is on the top of your pile this week?
Mike, on the top of my pile, this was kind of tough because luckily I've had some extra time and I actually got to read ahead a little bit, like some of the previews I'll be covering this week. And then I realized that this was a book that, although I have read it, I want to read it again. It is Bug Wars #1 from Image Comics. This is a new series by Jason Aaron with art by Mahmoud Asrar, colors by Matthew Wilson, letters by Becca Carey. If that team doesn't sell you on it alone, which it should, if you've been reading comics for a little while, imagine if Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but like a medieval dark fantasy war. That's the comic.
It's so stupid, and I want to read it so bad now.
You're just throwing darts in a VHS store at that point. Just writing what you hit.
Right.
I think Jason Aaron was walking by his house and a bunch of like his VHS just fell on him.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait a minute. Let me call my movie Bug Wars. And so as I mentioned, I read this a little while back because we got a preview for it. But I'm planning to reread it because I remember having such a good time there's a mix of like this really cool, beautiful art with like these gnarly battles that are on the page, and it seems like it's gonna be a really epic story. But I want to make a decision now. Like, is this a book that I want to read month to month, or is this something that I'm gonna go back and just do as a trade as I've been doing? I mean, we talked about that a lot this episode.
Yeah.
But this book follows Slaymaker, great name for a medieval dark fantasy book, who is a kid from Alabama who is suddenly lost in a vicious world beyond his imagining. A world of marauding ant armies, spellcasting spider witches, and beetle riding barbarians. A kingdom of tiny. That's really good.
I'm like so
good.
ashamed that I think that that's the coolest thing in the entire world right now.
Yeah, a kingdom of tiny but deadly warriors hidden in his own backyard. The same world that saw his father eaten alive by insects now plunges young Slade into the middle of a brutal bug war to decide the fate of his family. So, yeah, I mean, this book has it all. It's got bugs, it's got lawnmowers, it's got like just everything you want in a comic.
Yeah, nailed it.
Spellcasting, spider witches. I mean, like, I'm in, dude. Like, I don't care.
Dude, those barbarians riding the like horn beetles, they look so cool.
Yeah.
Like, just look at the image the preview art for this.
Yeah.
And I think you're gonna be sold on it. Like, yeah, I'm very excited to revisit this. And then follow me on social media, and I'll tell you if I'm gonna keep reading it month to month or not. That'll be the mystery.
And I think I'm gonna read this right after we finish recording.
Yeah,
actually, I think that's what's gonna happen.
Pretty awesome. Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, like, here's the thing. Like, it's so like this is such a ridiculous premise for a book, and I feel like, and this is me getting into Mike's weird corner of his brain about comic books for a second, but I feel like the premise of Bug Wars is something you'd expect from another smaller publisher or a publisher you've never heard of, creators you've never heard of, and the art's like really gory or really like blocky. But this is Jason Aaron and fucking Mahmoud Asrar. Like, these are the guys who were like driving X-Men and they like a bunch of Marvel books for a long time. So like, this book is going to be cool as shit. Like, I don't know. Like, if you think of the brutalism of Jason Aaron's big two work that he's done, right? Especially like Thor. That's where I'm coming from. It's like, I cannot express how much I love his God Bomb storyline when he did Thor.
Yep.
And now, like, we can remove all of the trappings of Marvel Comics and instead just do like, what's the craziest idea we could think of right now? Let's do it in 6 fucking issues. One, I love that it is a 6-issue mini, right? I'm glad that this is like just trying to be like a mini. I'm sure that we'll get the eventual spinoff of Bug Wars 2, the Desert Bugs or something like that, whatever it'll be. But like, I like that this might be just like a one and done thing. And that's really, really exciting. If only because like sometimes books don't need to go on forever. Like maybe it's just a brutal bug fight book, and that's cool. By the way, do not Google bug fights or bug wars without the number 1 or the comic. You get some weird Google results. I did that earlier.
Okay.
It was a mistake. But yeah, this looks super exciting, and I just want to see Asrar just like flex on us for 6 issues. I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loving the Jason Aaron Turtles right now, the TMNT book that he's doing.
Oh yeah,
it's completely different. It feels really cool. The latest issue, the boys are finally back in New York, but New York's not the way they left it. So like, he can write a comic. Like, it doesn't have to be like a franchise thing or whatever. Like, he can write a comic. So I'm very excited to see how these 6 issues play out.
I think it only took like 15 plus years for Jason Aaron to be working in the industry for us to finally agree. Maybe he can write a comic.
Come on the show, Jason Aaron.
Just kidding, Jason. We love your work. Clearly, we're all very familiar with it. It's disgusting, I think, how familiar we are with your work. But Danny, thank you for bringing up Bug Wars. I know there's a couple people on our Discord server that were excited about this book when it was announced, and I remember it being like a whole big deal at like SDCC or something last year. So I'm glad to see it finally come out. This book's insane. Kara posted in the Discord, Bug Wars is giving Sword of the Atom, which has a man with a sword fighting against a giant snake, and you know what? We love that. We love that for us. Well, oh man, all I could think of is just how much more intense Honey, I Shrunk the Kids could be if there was like actual like swords.
Can you
and
imagine Rick Moranis running around on top of a like horn beetle?
Yeah, I mean, Imagine a shrunk down Ghostbusters. All right, now we're getting too close, too crazy. But anyway, I think that's where we'll wrap the show this week. I want to thank you guys for your time. This has been fantastic. I really am going to go read Bug Wars right after this. As a reminder, IRCB Kickstarter is going to be live on March 3rd, so go to ircb.fyi/zine to go get notified when that goes live. Like I said, we're aiming to get to like 100 people who are like so excited about this book before it launches, and you could be one of those people, and we would give you a big hug and a kiss over the internet if you do it. So head over to that website, do that. It's in the show notes. I say thank you to everybody listening live. Thank you to Danny and Paul for your time today. Thank you to Kara for proof listening. Thank you to Zander, who edits this show and makes us all sound fantastic. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.